Okay, so this testimony is about to get really, really interesting, and we're going to go back into more of this testimony in just a few minutes. But first, I want to introduce our first-time guest here on the Law and Crime Network. We're so pleased to have Evan Lipton with us. He's a criminal defense attorney here in the New York area. And I know you've been looking into this case. You kind of came for the really best time of this case because we are having the rare opportunity to actually hear from a defendant himself take the stand. Now, we haven't gotten to the real meat of this case yet, but let's talk a little bit about his demeanor, how he's coming off right away.
Sure.
Your thoughts?
Great to be here, Rachel.
Yes.
The first thing I'd like to say is this is a very difficult case for a defense attorney. I mean, the combined circumstances of Leon's statements and these set-up photos that they had of the woman with the zip ties and his opportunity to call this off, the picture of the gentleman slumped over the car. I mean, it's just a really terrible circumstance for him. And the defense attorneys are left essentially with no choice but to put him on the stand. I mean, the defense in this case is, I didn't mean what I said.
I didn't mean what I said. I meant something else. I never meant to kill her. That's basically the defense. I never meant to kill her.
So their only shot of convincing a jury of this is his demeanor on the stand and is his credibility. And so far, I mean, I can't say I'm impressed. I mean, he is pushing too hard. He doesn't look calm.
He's trying too hard. I feel like he's trying too hard.
It's a really big ask of the jury to convince them of this. And in order to do so, I think his arguments and points should be streamlined, and they're not. He's kind of all over the place. I'd like to see what happens on cross. It's going to be rough.
Yeah, it certainly is. I don't think he's going to get through the cross-examination unscathed in this. Again, this is the fascinating case of a former doctor in the Houston area. He is facing solicitation of capital murder charge for setting up this plot. It was a murder-for-hire plot. We're going to go back into more of Leon Jacobs' testimony in just a few minutes, so stay with us. Okay, this is pretty rare. Here we are. We're listening to testimony from Leon Jacob. He is the defendant himself in this case. He's facing those 2 counts of solicitation of capital murder. He's accused of setting up a murder-for-hire plot in an attempt to kill his ex-girlfriend and his new lover's ex-husband. If you follow all of that, Evan Lipton is here, a criminal defense attorney, to help break all of this down. We're just hearing him on the stand. You know, the testimony is a little bit dry considering this is the defendant, but what I got out of it was this line: I never asked anyone to kill anybody. What did you get out of that testimony? This is the direct examination by the defense attorney.
I mean, he's trying to wiggle between the words that he said on these tapes.
Right.
So he's narrowing it down to trying to exclude the specific acts that he's alleged to have committed in this indictment.
Which is the murder, right?
Which is the solicitation for murder. Paying somebody else to kill someone. That's what he's accused of doing. And he's trying to say, I paid him to do something else, not to kill him.
And he's trying to say he paid him to basically get rid of his problem, which was Megan Barakesh. She was causing all these issues for him. He was facing an assault and a stalking case. He just wanted to get rid of her out of the state, right? That's his contention.
Correct. And the other thing we're seeing here, just came in a little bit, is the blame the dead girl.
Yes.
So, you know, unfortunately, Ms. McDaniel committed suicide before she could be brought to trial.
And that's his, just for our viewers that don't know, was his co-defendant, his lover, Valerie McDaniel. They were in on this plot together, according to prosecutors.
So Mr. Jacobs is left to say that if there was some agreement with the undercover to kill these people, McDaniels did it while I was out of the room. It's pretty far-fetched, but again, they're working with what they have.
Yeah, the defense does not have a lot to go on with this. They had to do what they had to do, which was put him on the stand. But listen, we're going to get into some interesting stuff after this break. You're going to hear cross-examination. It gets fiery. I don't think Leon did so well. Stay with us. Okay, so we're seeing a totally different Leon Jacob here. So we saw his direct, and then we had the prosecutor begin cross-examination. I'm here with Evan Lipton, criminal defense attorney, and you notice right away his demeanor changed.
Yeah, Rachel, this is what this case comes down to for Mr. Jacobs. He's been led through his direct testimony. He's presented his best argument as it is, and now he's being cross-examined by the prosecutor. And the change in his demeanor, his splitting hairs over these types of questions that he's being asked, is not helpful to him. It's not helpful to maintaining his credibility. And a question like we just heard, did your mother pay your child support? And he wants to disagree with that statement because, in fact, his mother handed him a check,
Right.
and he handed the check
to
pay for child support. That's not helpful to him. And frankly, he should have been coached through this. I mean, this is something that should have been expected. He's going to be annoyed by the prosecutor's questions. He's going to be put in an anxious place, but he's got to figure out a better strategy than this.
Yeah, okay, but let's talk about the prosecutor for a minute, too, because I kind of like it because this guy, I think, is very, very guilty, so I like her really giving it to him. However, she comes on really, really strong.
Yeah, frankly, it's not in my DNA to sympathize with prosecutors that much. It's not my way of looking at things, and
Yeah.
I don't love her. I don't love the attitude that she's taking with the defendant. I don't think it's necessary. She's got a lot to work with too, and she's going further than she has to. If I were that jury, I'd be questioning her credibility a little bit as well. Not that I don't think it's going to matter in the end necessarily.
Okay, so we were just hearing some of the cross-examination, and we were talking about how he made a living, basically, his family helping him with the bills, but we haven't talked about the actual crime he's accused of yet. Let me tell you, folks, when the cross-examination begins and the prosecutor gets at him regarding this, it gets very, very, very interesting. What do you think, Evan, in terms of strategy for those questions in particular? What would you be telling Leon Jacob?
I would be telling him to answer the questions as clearly and briefly as he can. A lawyer once taught me that if you can answer a question in a paragraph, you don't give a page. If you can answer in a sentence, you don't give a paragraph. And that's what Mr. Jacobs should be doing right now. And he's not. He's being asked many yes or no questions by the prosecutor. He should be limiting his answers to those yes or no answers, and then let his lawyer clean this up, either on redirect or in his summation. Leon Jacobs' only goal should be to get through this cross-examination. He shouldn't be trying to make points because he's not going to be able to.
Okay, let's talk a little bit too about something else that happened in this case. And as I said, it's a bit of a convoluted, confusing case. But this was a situation where this guy Leon Jacob actually hired an undercover cop, and they staged a murder scene, and the jurors got to see the pictures, and I think we have them now, of what the murders were staged to look like. And again, we're about to show these pictures. This is not a real murder scene. This was staged by the police. You can see there, and Evan, you can see them as well. So there she is, bound up. She has tape on her mouth. She looks like she's really, really scared. When jurors see something like this, does it have an effect on them?
Rachel, it's worse than that. My understanding is they gave Mr. Jacobs the opportunity to call this off at the point he was shown the photo of her in those zip ties there.
Right.
I mean, how he's going to get out from under that in his testimony, I'm really curious to see.
But of course, according to Mr. Jacobs, he never meant to kill these people.
Well, if that's true, when he saw the person who he hired about to kill this person, he should have called him off.
Because he saw those pictures. He had an opportunity. He thought they were about to die, but he did not do it. Okay, so as I said, I've been teasing this, but I'm promising you it's about to get very interesting with this cross-examination of Leon Jacobs. You're not going to want to miss it. Stick around. We'll be back in just a few minutes. So Leon Jacob is trying to paint himself as someone who is madly still in love with Megan Verikas, his ex-girlfriend, the same girl he's accused of trying to murder. But the prosecution, Evan, is doing a pretty effective job of saying, wait a second, if you're so in love with this woman, why 7 days after you broke up are you having sex with another woman?
I mean, he's trying to portray himself as, a victim of his own emotions, as a victim of a situation that's gone out of control. And, it doesn't comport with what I'd call like adult reality, right? I mean, we are able to control the situations we're in, and when things become like so crazy that all of a sudden someone's getting murdered and you didn't expect it, it tends to be a way to call off something like that.
And that's kind of the crux of his defense, that things spiraled out of control for me. I never meant for this to happen. Yes, I was in love with Megan, but I didn't ever want to hurt her. I wanted to scare her. I didn't want to kill her. But how effective is that? How believable is that?
You know, the jurors are going to apply their common sense to the circumstances, and they're going to try to think of whether they or somebody they know or respect, or a professional, he's a doctor. You know, there's a certain expectation.
Some kind of doctor. We're not
That's
sure.
what you keep telling me.
Some kind of doctor.
There's expectations as to how you comport yourself. And I don't think it's going to be very difficult for the jurors to believe that somebody like this could lose control of a situation in a way that they couldn't see themselves losing control of a situation. It's going to be up to the defense attorneys to see if they can maybe present some kind of analogy, some way of making them understand the perspective of their client.
This is why I lost control. But again, I go back to what you brought up in an earlier block, is when we were showing those pictures of the staged murder where Leon Jacob had an opportunity to stop. There they are.
Right.
Again, folks, this is not a real dead person. This was staged by the police. But Leon Jacob had an opportunity to stop this. How are the jurors going to ever believe he didn't want them murdered after seeing photos like this?
And I'm really curious to see how he deals with that on cross. You know, another aspect of this defense has been this idea that the investigators got out of control, that they became overzealous, that they tried to put together a narrative that they themselves believe that wasn't what Mr. Jacobs had actually bought into. And, you know, I get that from a certain perspective. The investigators, I think, had a lot of fun on this job.
They certainly did.
A lot to work with. But again, that's another hard sell to the jury. They were out to get this guy so much that they're going to set it up to this level.
But the bottom line is the bottom line. He paid this guy to try to kill, or he thought to kill, his ex-girlfriend and his new lover's ex-husband. Okay, we're going to continue with more of this testimony from Leon Jacob himself, the defendant, in his own words, in just moments. Stay with us. Okay, so this guy's being a little bit shifty here, Evan. He asked the undercover officer at the Olive Garden, who he was paying this money to in this scheme, are you a cop? And then when he's asked by the prosecution, were you scared that he was law enforcement? He said, probably.
I mean, so we're seeing two things. We're seeing his shiftiness on cross, and a basic an immaturity.
Yes.
I think. I mean, this is the second time that we've heard him refer to part of this in terms that you'd expect to hear in like a high school pot deal, right?
Totally. I love that analogy.
Are you a police officer? And
yes.
he has to answer honestly, which is of course completely false.
Right, of course.
And we also heard earlier,
an undercover police officer is not going to say, yeah, man, you got me. Okay, let's not do this deal. I'm an undercover cop. Okay.
Right. It's like a Grateful Dead parking lot myth. Not true. And we heard that earlier as well when he was talking about the money that he was paying to the investigator as he had it under some laundry on the table. It's like, if I don't just hand it to you directly, it's all going to be cool.
Yes, this sounds like he's watched way too many like crime thriller movies, and
or not enough, or just the bad ones. Perhaps.
Oh yeah, maybe he's just seen the really bad ones where they didn't actually consult police departments and bad guys about how to do crimes.
In the movies, they do get away with it sometimes.
They do, but this one I don't know about. And again, we're watching this fascinating case. If you're just joining us, this is out of Houston area. The Leon Jacob case. He's facing 2 counts of solicitation of capital murder, and again, we're calling it one of the more bizarre cases that we followed because it's involving him working with his lover, who's a prominent veterinarian in the community, to hire a hitman to murder, it was an unsuccessful plot, his ex-girlfriend and his new lover's ex-husband, Mac McDaniel and Megan Veritas. Both of them took the stand, and we heard their side of how they worked with the undercover police to stage this murder that never happened. Now we're hearing from Leon Jacob, and when we come back in just minutes, we'll hear more of the cross-examination. We're finally drilling into the actual crime. You're definitely not going to want to miss this. Stay with us. Okay, so that is really the crux of the case here. The prosecution, I think, Evan, really laying out the motivation for why Leon Jacob might have done this. And he's not faring so well, in my mind.
I mean, this guy is acting like he never thought the prosecution would be asking him these questions.
Yeah, like,
right?
why are you asking me this? I'm pissed.
I mean, his tact is, I think, completely wrong. I mean, he should be, instead of sparring with the prosecutor over whether he made a certain statement, he should be acknowledging what he said.
A bit inconsequential, some of the things he spars over. It's like,
Certainly.
who cares?
He's sparring over everything.
He is,
And the tactic
yes.
instead should be, I said this, I can't believe I said it, I understand how it sounds to y'all, but let me explain to you why that's wrong. He's not doing that.
He's kind of even trying to deny reality in the fact he's asked, well, did you say this? And he's trying to say, no, it was a question. Well,
Right.
how can, I mean, I didn't write the exact quote down, but how can you say that, telling someone to kidnap someone and scare them thinking that their parents are going to die is a question?
And none of this really matters. It shouldn't
Right.
be a topic of the conversation. I mean, if somebody around your table with your $10,000 on it is talking about these things, you kind of have fair warning.
In terms of getting over this, I mean, we're about to play, so stick around in just moments. We're gonna play the verdict here, and this is one of the last things that the jury. Obviously, we have the closings as well, but this is Leon Jacobs' testimony was pretty much at the end of the case here.
Right.
What kind of taste does that leave in a juror's mouth, especially? Well, we'll get to that because we have to take a quick break, and we'll get to some of those questions because I think that's really essential. How did Leon Jacob come off to the jurors?
Right.
Is he believable? Do they hate him? Do they think that he should go to prison for life? That's really the question. So when we come back, we're going to delve more into some of his testimony, hear more of the cross. We'll be back in just a few seconds. Wow. So I think the prosecutor there does a very effective job of setting up the motivation and really pinning Leon Jacob in a corner with this case. Evan, would you agree with me here?
I mean, it was a powerful ending showing the lengths that he was willing to go through to have somebody break into her cell phone, essentially send a false email that he was going to present to his own attorney for the purposes of getting out of this family offense. I get it, but I also get his point. There's a big difference between wanting to send a fake email and wanting to kill someone.
Right, and he said that, yes, but I still wanted her alive. Okay, so here is what we've all been waiting for, the verdict. Let's take a listen as they read it.
Thank you. Please be seated. Mr. Gidley, has the jury reached unanimous verdicts on both cases? Would you hand those verdicts to my bailiff? Would the defendant please stand? As to cause number 1543813, State of Texas versus Leon Philip Jacob. Will the jury find the defendant Leon Philip Jacob guilty of solicitation of capital murder as charged in the indictment signed by the foreman of the jury? Cause number 1543812. We, the jury, find the defendant Leon Philip Jacob guilty of solicitation of capital murder as charged in the indictment. All right, thank you. You may be seated. All right, ladies and gentlemen.
Guilty for the 2 counts of solicitation of capital murder. Evan Lipton, you've been a great guest all afternoon, criminal defense attorney here in New York. Gotta say, sometimes I'm at the edge of my seat during these trials trying to figure out what's going to be the verdict. This one, not so much. Would you agree?
I would agree. There was nothing shocking about this verdict. And I think we said at the beginning of this segment here, at the beginning of this afternoon, that some cases have to be tried. Some cases a lawyer has no choice but to try that case, either because there's been no acceptable off-ramp given to his client, or his client isn't willing to take that step.
Except, yeah.
I want to say, I don't want to leave here without saying that I have great respect for the defense attorneys in this case. They had a very, very difficult job to deal with, and they did it well. I was particularly impressed by the older of the 2 defense attorneys, the demeanor that he had. I think he maintained his credibility throughout the case. And I think that's really important. And a lot of times people are too quick to kind of lump in the defense attorney with the, for lack of a better word, stupidity of the acts of the defendant. And that shouldn't happen.
Listen,
these guys did a great job.
This defendant gave the defense attorneys a very, very hard job. We had pictures, we had undercover video, we had wires of an undercover officer having conversations with him about the crime. Talk about a hard case. This was something where if you're a defense attorney, you're trying to probably engineer a deal before it gets to trial. We talked about earlier why the heck did this case get to trial if it seemed like they had so much evidence. And your conclusion to that is basically maybe they weren't offered a deal?
Maybe they weren't offered a deal, or maybe they weren't offered a deal that the client could wrap his head around. So let's say he was offered a 20-year sentence or something.
Yeah.
That would be something he should have accepted. He's in his 40s. He'd be able to walk out at the end of that. But that's not something most people can accept. And it might be that he wanted to roll the dice here.
Evan, thank you so much. First-time guest. We love having you on.
Thank you for having me.
Very exciting day. We have a very exciting day planned for you tomorrow on the Law&Crime Network. Just moments ago, the Nicholas Cruz tapes drops. We'll bring you those tomorrow. Stay with us.